Pradeep ji, good evening. Welcome. Welcome to my YouTube channel, Exports Nation Live. Let us wait for few minutes for other people to join. We'll start. Sunendra, good evening. Welcome. I'm thankful to all the audience who have joined today for this session. So today we'll be taking very special topic that will focus on the markings and labeling in export as well as imports. So in international trade, what is the significance of markings and labeling? So we will be talking about that. I will take up a presentation, PVT, a PowerPoint presentation, which I have prepared for this session. I'll take up that and we'll discuss what are the different issues and aspects that are involved with markings and labeling. But before that, I want to share with you that there are differences between markings and labeling. What are these differences? So, when we say markings and when we say labeling, what is the difference between the so called markings and labeling? So, that I will explain first and then we will go to the presentation. So, markings markings are very generic terms that are used to identify what is there in the package. So it has many functions. It is much more detailed. It tells you about the quantity, it tells you about the identification of the packages. It sometimes tell you about the whether the material which is there inside is liquid or is it chemical, whatever it is. So markings are very general in nature, and markings are something that every package which is exported or imported, it will have, it will refer to many things. So it is much more detailed. And labeling is something that is kind of a alert. That is something which tells that a particular package is having some difference from the normal package. So, for example, hazards. For example, some items, primary items which are there inside the box, that can be dangerous. So, those things, those has to be communicated internationally, because when you are exporting or importing certain goods, they are moving on the ship, they are sometimes moving on air or on truck, and there are a lot of different people in between who are handling those, who are who are handling those cargoes. So what happens, that the people who are handling, the people who are the who are the ground teams, they need to know that a certain product, whether it is safe to handle, can it be handled in a normal way, or it has to be handled in any special way. So labeling is something that communicates uniform information that is understood universally, internationally. So it is not specific between first party and second party. It is not specific between the seller and the buyer. It is more public in nature. So I will give you one example, then you will understand what is the difference between markings and labeling. So I will take a very simple example. When you move your goods from one house to another house between cities, like many of you already know that when you move goods, you call the packer and mover and they pack the material. So when they pack the material, they generally use black or blue ink to write the number of the box or what is there in the box, whether it is clothes, whether it is utensils, things like that. So it writes many things to identify the boxes. Now, some boxes, some packets contains In household goods, either sometimes some liquid which may be which should be handled in certain way, or glass items, those are brittle items. So he generally put a yellow tape. You must have noticed in those boxes, special colored tape is affixed on those boxes, which signifies that this particular box has to be handled carefully. So this yellow color tape which is there on the box, it clearly tells anyone who is handling, whether he's at the packing side, or loading side, or the unloading side, or in between. Everybody knows the meaning of the yellow tape, that this item has to be handled very carefully. It is same thing in internationally. These labels, these so-called labels, are international labels. Generally, everybody follow the United Nations labeling instructions. So I will explain to you what are the UN labeling standards. So those are understood internationally, and since it is export, since it is imports, movement of the goods on the international platform, obviously they are more specific, more professional than my example which I have given you. The example which I have given of the mover and packer, that is much very simple and general example. Generally, yellow tape is easily available, and they simply put it. So this is for domestic purpose, it is okay. But for international purpose, when goods are moving from one country to another country, the language issues are there, many issues are there. So no single language can be used, no single color can be used. So it has to be uniform method of labeling. So I hope you understand the difference between the markings and labeling. So this is one part which I really wanted to convey to you, because whenever I talk on this topic, a lot of people ask that what is the difference between marks and labels. So everything gets mixed up. So you should not get mixed up about this. So that's why I started on sharing with you the marks, the difference between the marks and labels. So let me now share with you one presentation which I have prepared on this particular subject area, that will explain to you the markings requirement and labeling requirements in international trade in a very systematic manner. So you will have a better understanding. So I feel so. Let's see. So I hope you can see this presentation. Just a minute. It is taking some time. So I think it should be okay now. Just yes. Now I think it is okay. So we start with what are the objectives of these markings and labeling. If that is understood, everything will become much easier for you to understand. So first thing is that, very important thing, very general thing, very universal thing, is that marking and labeling, especially marking, is for the purpose of package identification. So in the international trade, as you know, so much of goods are being moving from one country to another country through various modes, and so many goods they are moving in containers. They need to have package identification that should be very professional in nature. So that package identification is one of the major objectives. Now, second objective refers to the house available or master airway bill. So what is the meaning of this? Most of the cases you will see that you are dealing with a freight forwarder or you are dealing with a consolidator who is working on behalf of some shipping line or some airline. So normally what happens, these intermediaries, the C&F agent or the freight forwarders, they are in the habit of issuing their own airway bill, which is called house airway bill. And subsequently, when goods are put on the ship, they get the master airway bill. So this is a difference. So what is the difference between the house airway bill? Because shipping company will not have much information about the house airway bill. It will have the information about the master airway bill. On the other hand, the customer, the exporter as well as the importer, they have the information about the house airway bill. So this difference between the main airway bill and the temporary airway bill, so this I will explain to you a little bit in more detail in the next slide. But there is a problem of this that can be solved through markings, so I will explain how. Now, if the cargo is hazardous, definitely some kind of markings are required and some kind of international labeling is required for the universal communication on the international level. So that is the third objective. The fourth objective is that certain cargo need special handling, whether it is brittle, whether it is liquid cargo, or there are some cargo that if it is given jerk, the material can explode or something can happen. Apart from being hazardous, there can be many different types of cargo. If you list down the nature and types of cargo, you will find that this list will run into more than 1000 types of cargo. So many of those cargo are in need of the special handling. And some international rules are there, especially for the hazardous cargo or some special handling cargo. I will explain what are those international rules. Why international rules? Because cargo is moving on the international platforms, different modes. So it should be uniformly understood. Language barrier or other barriers should not come. There should not be any local method of marking or labeling that will create some misunderstanding or confusion. So, to reduce that misunderstanding or confusion, you need international rules for markings and labeling, especially labeling. Now, there can be some requirement of the importers also in its own country for its own company purpose. For example, I will give you one example. The packaging is having primary packaging, secondary packaging, and tertiary packaging. So, when the goods are loaded on the ship, the first packaging that encounters to the ground handling team is the tertiary packing, that is the pallets, main packing. So marking is there on that also. Then secondary packaging, there are some marking, and primary packaging, there are some markings. Invariably, importers requirements are mostly in the primary packing, because sometimes those goods are to be sold in the marketing as it is, sometimes in the secondary packing itself it goes to the retailing. So maybe importer's address, maybe importer's company logo, so anything can be there. So I'll tell you a little bit more about it. Then the fifth sixth objective of marketing and labeling can be the local regulations on marking and labeling. So it is different from the international rules that I told you. There can be possibility in different countries, there can be local regulation. So I'll give you one example. For example, in Germany, especially when goods are exported to Germany, the German government has many local regulations of declaration of the documents, that is separate, but also on the boxes. For example, if the cargo is dry cargo or metallic cargo, so even if it is packaged, the primary, secondary, or tertiary, whatever the package is there, they want, for example, whether the details like details like the level of radiation, if it is there, any radiation is there. If it is nil, it should be written nil. So the radioactive material, uh, any possibility of radioactivity, that the people who are handling the cargo, they should not get exposed to any radiation. So in Germany, they are very, very strict about these things. So they have some special regulations. Those has to be marked on the boxes being sent to Germany. This is one example. Many other countries may have different requirement. For example, some of the Middle East countries, they may have their own religious based or whatever requirements. It may be there. Then seventh objective is the intellectual property right concerns. So these are the main objectives when we talk of the markings and labeling. So my idea was to explain to you that if we have understood if you have understood these objectives, one, two, three, four, five, six, seven objectives, then the understanding of the concept of marking and labeling will be very easy for you. So that was the first thing which I wanted to share with you, so that that what how we are trying to understand this topic. So once we have the list of the objectives, things become easy. So this is what I thought, that we start like this. So first objective, as I told you, package identification. So especially the focus is on the markings. So identification is mostly done by marking, not by labeling. Labeling is something that is public in nature. Marking is something that is personal in nature. Personal means seller and the buyer. So that is generally. So I'm not saying there is hard and fast rule. So it is basically for identification of the shipment of the particular document, that is the commercial invoice. So commercial invoice has to be identified with the shipment and especially the packing list. So marking, what special marking is there? Any special marks are there? Generally, identifier marks are there on the boxes, and those marks sometimes, and in most cases, the, that mark is also put on the packing list also. So it is becomes very easy to link the packing list and the invoice with a particular shipment. Which are the boxes? All boxes will have those marks. So this identification is mostly in export, import transactions in the tertiary package. So tertiary, I told you the pallets. So primary, secondary, and tertiary. Tertiary is the bigger package, which contain secondary package, and secondary package contains primary package. Primary packages are the retail package. So I hope you understand the meaning of this. Okay. So that is the package identification. Now I told you about the problem of the issuing of the house airway bill and the master airway bill. Shipping company, the carrier, they issue master airway bill. Freight forwarder invariably issue house airway bill. Both are different documents. Now, there shouldn't be any confusion of the cargo being shipped from the port of loading to the port of discharge or anywhere in the multimodal transport operation transaction. There should not be any confusion between these two documents. So, whatever is the house airway bill number and whatever is the master airway bill number, it should be there on the boxes. Once it is there, then it doesn't matter whether you have the house airway bill with you or you have the master airway bill. Because what happens when goods are given to the forwarder, invariably, forwarder is not in a mood or not in a position to give you the master airway bill as fast as possible. But at the same time, you may be interested to immediately go for the payment to the bank, that I want the payment. And if house airway bill is allowed in the letter of credit, you will take the house airway bill. by the forwarder with the promise that after some time, whenever the master airway bill is available, you can ask the forwarder to give. Another thing, many a times the carrier also recognize the house airway bill. So what happens in the air shipment, especially because airway bill is for the air shipment. So as soon as the goods reaches the destination, a fax copy of the house airway bill itself is okay. It is acceptable because that number is already there on the boxes. So airline does not have any problem in handing over the shipment to the consignee. So in this case, original airway bill is not required. Fax copy or email copy can work. And by that time, it is possible that the master airway bill is not with the forwarder, because in air shipment everything happens very fast. So I hope you understand the benefit of these both the numbers being on all boxes. Uh, all boxes mean text tertiary, which means pallets. I'm talking of the pallets of the air that are different size than the sea. So I hope you are able to appreciate the difference. Now, the third objective referred to the hazardous material or dangerous goods that we discussed. So, so marking, as I had explained to you, differs from the labeling because it is much more detailed. Its requirement is much more detailed. It can be some descriptive name, it can be identification number, it can be some instruction that handle with care or something like that, or some caution, or some it also writes what is the weight if it is very very heavy, or whatever weight is given there. And weight also gross weight or net weight, generally gross weight. Specifications may be there. UN marks, international marks. I'll just show you. There are not only labeling marks internationally available, but also for the marking also. There are international marks that are uniformly understood in each country. Everywhere they are understood, universally they are understood. So they can be used, or not everything, or a combination, whatever is practically used, unless it is statutory. Like for example, I told you some of the countries want certain information as marking on the boxes that is mandatory. So that is there. Now, if we are talking about the hazardous material, it is required, marking are required on the outer packaging, that is the tertiary packing, uh, identifying the hazardous material or dangerous goods. So it is very very important. Apart from the labeling, the reason is that the marking is also there, labeling is also there. For some reason, if the label is not there, the marking should also indicate the same thing. Generally, labels are affixed, they are pasted, and markings are printed. So the chances of labels getting removed from the boxes are much more. So it is a double caution for the hazardous and dangerous material, that you have the UN marks also and you have the UN labels also. Both the things. It is very important. It is a general practice. Okay. Generally, the marking requirements are there. So that is another objective. It should be durable. It should be in English wherever possible, unless it is, between two countries with different language. Generally, it has to be in English only. It should be printed or affixed on the surface of a package, or it can be labeling also. But label, as I told you, are very limited and very seldom used. As I told you, so labels can get removed. So possibility is there. Must be displayed on the background of sharply contrasting colors. So the what the like generally the color used for marking is generally black, and the background color, as you know, the carton colors generally, which is you know light brown, generally light brown. So black color is very easily displayed with this kind of background. I'll show you one picture also for this. And must be unobscured. So it should be away from any distracting thing which is there on the box. So maybe some advertising is there, some logo is there, whatever if it some logo is there, logo may be a mark actually. So it should not, the whatever the information you are giving, there should be a proper gap. I will show you that. Must be located away from any other marking, such as advertising. So different types of marking should have breathing space. So that is very, very important. Now, specialized markings, standard marks are there for liquid, hazardous material, or dangerous goods. One example I have given there for the orientation. So I will show you what are the specialized other markings. I will show you the list of that. So there can be specific marking for radioactive material, for poisonous, dangerous goods, or dangerous goods. So radioactive material is more serious. Poisonous, dangerous goods are second most serious, and dangerous goods. That is the third. Those three levels are there. Different markings are there. I will show you. So hazardous material markings that should be generally put like printed, not labels. So these has to be printed. So this list you can standard list you can get that is issued by United Nations. Like labeling, they have this complete list of the hazardous material. Uh, those are understood internationally. So it can be in red color also, depending on what is the background color, or it can be black color also. The example which I showed you. So this you can see here. Then labeling. Now comes labeling. Labeling generally identifies the specific primary and subsidiary hazards. So as I told you, the main purpose of label is to alert anyone who is handling for safety purpose, for emergency response, or any special equipment to be used, or any special dress is to be worn by the person who are handling it, if it is manual, or any special equipment for the loading and unloading. So these labels are mainly for safety concerns or emergency purpose. The these methods of communication rely on color thing, code thing, or some pictures. So these labels are uh, the combination of color, codes, and pictures. I will show you the example. The purpose is to clearly and immediately means alert, immediately identify the type of materials in the package. So I gave you the example also. The color will tell you, if specific color will tell you to become immediately alert quickly. So that is the purpose of labels. Markings are not for immediate purpose. So there are different classes, United Nations classes, according to which labels are to be put. So it can be explosive, it can be flammable or non-flammable, or flammable solids, oxidizing matters. Oxidizing matters can be poisonous, radioactive, corrosive, other hazard material. So these are different classes are there, and they have numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you can see here these numbers are there. Explosives numbers are there. So explosives can create a lot of problem, immediate problem. So these are the labels. So you can see in this label the color, codes, and color, codes, and pictures. All three are used to create these labels. So these are internationally understood labels for class 1, class 2, class 3. I showed you the classes. Class 4, class 5, class 6, class 7, class 8, class 9, like that. So all these are, you can easily get this information. There is no issue with this, but you have to understand that which class label you need. So that label either has to be pasted. Generally these labels are available as a pasting thing. Why pasting? Because they has to be shiny. So pasting with, they are on special paper, shining, and they should be very easily visible. It should be look different from the marking. Marking is very regular in nature, general in nature. Labels are something which are highlighting. Okay, so I think I had given you the example also of that. Now, in this, you can see here, I will show you shipping. If we talk of the marks, for example, like handling marks, orientation, right? Here, consignee marks, destination, and order number, all details are there. And if the package should not get wet, it is saying that it should be protected from moisture. So in this side also, you can see here, it is at the top. Why? Because this is very important information. So it is put on the top. Now in the center, the purpose is identification and the sunny name and all those details. And on the other side, the mark is there, maybe logo is there, some agreed picture is there between the buyer and the seller. So sometimes people write Jai Mata Di, or they will put Om or whatever shipping mark to identify. That should be very different from the signs which are generally used in the shipping. So it should be clearly visible. Then here at the bottom, those information that is not immediately of use to the people who are handling, like weight marking or number of packages and size and cases and country of origin. So these things are at the bottom. So I think this makes a lot of sense. And on this, now now label, when you have done this, then you put your label. If it is hazardous, maybe here your label is there, maybe here label is there, here label is there, on all sides you put the label, if it is hazardous or dangerous goods. So that becomes your label. So I think it is understood. So if we talk of the handling marks, which I was showing you, like protection from the water, or uh, upside top, what is the top of the box, and it should not be disoriented, or if it is glass fragile. So these are the handling marks. And here you can see the differences. It is not like labels, because mostly they are using the black color only, generally, right? And they generally rely not on the codes but on the picture. These marks are generally rely on the picture. The picture is more important. Then not even color is important, not even the code is important. Here the picture is important. Cargo handling marks. So it is different from the labels. Now, importer's requirement can be different. The business requirement may be there for marketing, by or logo of the importer, address, address of the importer, or under license of, all these things can be there. So that these information is generally put at the bottom, if in the tertiary packing. If it is put on the tertiary packing, in secondary and primary packing, it will be put whatever way importer wants. So that is possible. But in the tertiary packing, if it is has to be put this thing, it should be in the bottom, for the obvious reason. Now there can be some local regulations. I was giving you example of Germany. I had given you of marking and labeling. I gave you the example of Germany about radioactive. Uh, if we take the Indian example, so goods being imported in India, Indian customs are strict and ensure that imported items have the legally required information before these enter the retail market. Those items that has to be sold in the market, Indian market. So Indian custom is very, very strict. Indian custom has many rules that has to be understood. I will give you example of one example of that also. But if the goods are not for the sale in the country, but for re-export, export oriented units or special economic zone, there these do not apply. These regulations do not apply to that imports. So their actual user, or for basically their actual user, they will be using the material to create something else. So there it will not apply, but it will apply for goods being traded in the for the selling in the market. So this is just one example. So pre-packaged item, for example. So I will not go to the detail. These are the mandatory customs requirement, Indian customs requirement. not for the tertiary packing, for the secondary and primary packing. So all this information has to be there for pre-packaged items, which are to be sold in the market. Like for example, MRP, it should have month and year of packing, it should have net quantity. So when you buy something in the market, you get all this information. So all these information are mandatory in India when you import something. So this is what I wanted to show you. So food products, there are also labeling requirement in India. Every country have some requirement. Like another thing I will tell you, for food items, for example, you have this green logo. You know whether the item is vegetarian or non-vegetarian. Like you have this kind of uh, thing should be there. So this is in India, but it may not be there in any other country. So they are local requirement. It's in India. Every item should have green or red symbol like this, whether it contains is it pure veg or not. So that kind of requirement may be there, local requirement for food items especially. Like Japan has its own requirement. So last point in today's session relates to the intellectual property rights. So that is generally concerned with the use of logo or the primary packing. For example, I can give you this example. It's a real example. This is the primary packaging of the whiskey that is sold in Goa, in India. And you can see this is the international, very famous brand, Ricard. Okay, so there was a legal case between Ricard and Real. So Real was using, you can see here, it is very, very similar. So what happens that, these kind of in international trade, if you sell, sometimes custom also see the primary packing. So it is not that, don't think that the custom will not look at the label used in the primary packing. They can open, they can check all these things. So you can see Ricard product is 2000 rupees per bottle, and the Indian product is 60 rupees per bottle. And you can see the difference. They look very similar. So it is an intellectual property right concern. So this case went in the court also, Indian court. So this is what I wanted to tell you about the different issues that are involved in the marking and labeling. So I hope that uh, the way, my idea was in this session to give you systematically the things which you should know about the markings and labeling, so that you are more knowledgeable of the things that are happening. Many times, the freight forwarder or the people who are packing it can make mistakes. So those mistakes has to be avoided in the international trade, especially in export. So I hope this session was useful, and you found it informative, and maybe you would not need more information, but definitely you can download the marks and labels. Those are internationally used, and those are very important internationally. So you should keep a copy of that. You can download it from the net. You can get all this information. So I hope uh, there was no uh, uh, issue that you could not understand in this presentation. If you have any question, you can ask me. Otherwise, we can meet in the next session, live session. That will be on Monday, coming Monday. So I will create the session on coming Monday, and we can have the next session. And in between, for the Monday session, if you want me to take up some topic of your interest, I can take that. So that will be good for you also, and it will also make the session useful. So If there are no questions today, uh, I wish to thank you for joining this session, and wait to meet you on Monday at 8:30 p.m. Thank you. Good night. Goodbye.